What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another a viewer response. So back in November, I put up a video asking for you guys to give me your picks for bad metal albums, and I would come on here and say if I agree or not. So, I got quite a bit of response on that thread. So, with all that said, I basically went through the comments of the video and a few Instagram comments I got, and, well, we're gonna try and skim through them as quickly as I can because, again, camera's battery for some reason's on life support. So, kicking things off with Instagram comments, we have Thrashsteroid, who, Naomi, really good friend. She says, Megadeth Super Collider. I 100% agree. In fact, that was my last place on my Megadeth ranking that I did way back like 3 years ago. So, yeah, I would agree, Super Collider. It just doesn't feel really like a Megadeth album. The only song on that album that's even worth a damn is Kingmaker. But aside from that, no. I don't know what in the hell was going on with that album. David Draymond was on there, but I don't think that had anything to do with it. It just, I don't know what happened with behind the scenes, but yeah, it did not feel like a Megadeth album at all. Next up from Metalhead Patriot 06, he says, Celtic Frost's prototype demo. Even though it's not an actual album, I will also agree with that. I mean, I've only heard samples of that demo, and yeah, it just sounds like Celtic Frost trying to be like industrial nu metal, and it was garbage. So I'm just going to leave it at that and move on quickly. Next up from Death Metal Elitist, he says, Entombed Serpent Saint. That's kind of tough because I had that one ranked pretty low in my Entombed ranking. I don't think it's necessarily a bad album. It's just uninspired crust punk. So I'm going to actually go with agree. I will agree it's a bad album, but I don't think it's completely terrible. It's just, to me, it didn't really feel like Entombed. It just felt like Entombed trying to become a crust punk band, and it just did not suit them. Next up from Metal Woman 666, how's it going, Courtney? She says, Iron Maiden Virtual 11. It might be the worst Maiden album, but I'm gonna disagree when people say it's a bad album. I don't think it's bad. It's just okay. It's just an okay album. Like, there are some good songs on it, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the entire album's void of what am I trying to say? It's not like the whole album's entirely devoid of anything worth listening to. Like, there are some songs on there that are good. It's just, Blaze Bayley at that point in the band, could have lived without, but I don't think it's bad. I just think it's okay at best and average at worst. So I'm going to actually disagree when it comes to it being a bad album. And then finally from the Instagram comments is from Kat Vertigo Nagasawa. Really cool chick who I've done collabs with on Instagram. She says, Gorefest Soul Survivor. This one I'm actually going to go undecided. I've never really actually listened to Soul Survivor by Gorefest, but judging from the Metal Archive reviews, it's kind of mixed. Like, there was a couple people that thought it was bad, but for the most part it seemed like it was a more positively seen album, so I guess judging off of that, it doesn't sound like it's the worst. So, I don't know. I'm going to go undecided on that. I don't have an opinion about this album, so I'm just going to leave it at that and move on. Now into the YouTube comments, which there was a hefty amount, so as I'm scrolling through here just to make sure about any doubles. The first one comes from Yuhaki Manichi, who actually did a response on the album or band versus band. He says, Morbid Angels elude Divinum Insanus. 100% agree. In fact, I would argue, perhaps, that it's arguably the top 5 worst metal albums of all time. I don't think it's quite number 1. That will come later in this video, as you'll find out. But yeah, Aluminum Anus, what in the ever-loving hell were they thinking? Apart from Blades of Baal, fuck the rest of the album. Next up from Schmerd Zachlin. I'm not sure. He just wrote, I don't know any bad albums because I only listen to the good music. Anyways, the absolute worst are anything by Tougher Than Nails. Ziarchi Swit with Diably Wizwala? I don't know. And of course, don't forget new 6 Feet Under albums. Figured those would be brought up. But anyways, moving on to Christopher Morrow. He says, Massacre Promise. I will agree. However, I'm going to confess, there are riffs on that album I actually can get behind. So, riff-wise, there are some cool riffs. I'm not saying the entire album, like only in a couple of songs, there are some cool riffs. But other than that, yeah, this album's horrible. I mean, following From Beyond 5 years later, and the whole album is just basically Cam Lee bitching about a breakup he went through. What in the ever-loving fuck was this? Lyrically and conceptually. Musically, it was just kind of run-of-the-mill groovy death metal with, again, some pretty solid riffs. But aside from that, bleh. Excuse me. Next up from Alain MC, he says, Skin Lab, bound, gagged, and blindfolded. I'm going to have to go undecided on this one because I've actually never listened to Skin Lab, so I can't really make a judgment on it. Excuse me. Now, this one was brought up by quite a few people. Dylan Lacari said it, as well as Colson Tipple, and the Twisted Christian all say Metallica, Saint Anger. I will agree, it is bad. However, in comparison to pretty much, apart from one, it's arguably the best bad album out of every suggestion, because I think it's aged well, only in the sense there have been far worse albums to come out since, and hell, even far worse albums before Saint Anger. If anything, Saint Anger is just the tip of the iceberg, which ain't the worst place to be at. So, yeah, I will agree it's a bad album, but I don't think it's the worst. Again, that's coming up very soon. Next up, the Hunter Spur also said Virtual 11. Next up, the Awkward Turtle 20XX84 says, My Dying Bride's 34.788% complete. Again, this is another one I'm going to have to go undecided because I've not listened to that album, but I was reading like reviews on the archives, kind of in a similar case of the Gorefest Soul Survivor album. It seemed to be more positive rather than negative, so yeah, for now I'm going to have to go undecided. Tom P. 8463 also said Super Collider. Now this next one, Sean Westchesler, I have no idea. He says Metallica and Justice for All, and I quote, It's missing a quarter of the band. And I think, yeah, that was all I got. It was missing a quarter of the band. Hard disagree. And you should be grounded. And Justice for All is fantastic. Yeah, the old saying, there's no bass on it. Does it really have to matter that much? If the music's great, then shouldn't that be what matters? And the album's a classic. So screw off, respectfully. Next up we have from Dakota Boswick. He says, Black Sabbath, Forbidden. Again, I will agree. I will say there are, again, some really cool riffs on here. But as a whole, the album felt like Ernie C. taking over the band. Even with the new remastered, better production, doesn't help that the songwriting's just ugh. And even Sabbath themselves don't like this album, so there you go with that. That's really all you need to know. Next up from Music Geekery. He, as well as I'm trying to figure out how the hell you pronounce some of these names. Rilandino and Bayou Survivor all say Metallica Lulu. 100% agree. It doesn't count as a Metallica album. It was a collab with Lou Reed, not in the Metallica pantheon, in my opinion. Yeah, the album was a fucking mess. And as Cover Killer Nation even said back in the day, it sounded like either Metallica shines, Lou Reed shines, or nobody shines. Didn't feel like a good collaborative effort. It basically felt like a Lou Reed album with Metallica playing some metal riffs. And it just didn't work. So I will 100% agree with that. Far worse than Saint Anger. Next up from Adam Thomas Music, he says Judas Priest, Nostradamus. I'm going to disagree. I am one of the few people seemingly on YouTube that likes some of Nostradamus. Not the whole thing. And I've talked about this in the past. It's mainly most of the songs on Disc 1 and the final 2 tracks of Disc 2 that I like. Everything else, not really. Like, if I was to have put together the Nostradamus album, I would have had Dawn of Creation and the Prophecy. I would have Revelations, War, Pestilence and Plague, Death, Persecution, the title track, and Future of Mankind. So only 8 songs. And I think, and also if the production was a little bit better, I don't think people would shit on it. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, I'm going to disagree that Nostradamus is a bad album. I think at best it's okay, at worst average, because there are actually some good songs. Next up from James Huseby says, unfortunately, I'm 59 and have to put collection on hold. Have to get debt-free before retirement. Thank you for that. Zero Veta was the only one that said Metallica, or as he called it, Shitalica. Shame on you. With Load. I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree with anybody out there that says that Load and Reload are bad albums. The only reason people say that those albums are bad is because it ain't thrash. Metallica doesn't have to be a thrash band all the time, guys. And in this case, they wanted to play more like bluesy Black Sabbath type stuff, because that's one of their big influences. For what they are going for, they're good albums. There are hidden gems on both albums. I will say Reload in particular has the most underrated song of their career, Where the Wild Things Are. Load has one of my favorite songs of all time by them, which is Bleeding Me. There are really good songs on both albums that people don't give a shot to because they just want to whine and cry that they're not playing thrash anymore. For what they are, which is like Sabbath bluesy inspired stuff, it's good. There you go. Next up from CBN, he says Celtic Frost, Cold Lake. Most disappointing album ever, not worthy of the mighty Celtic Frost name. Another definite agreement. Some good riffs, but that's about it. Why did Tom decide to go hair metal? Who the hell really knows? Probably some of that cheddar cheese he needed. And then the final one, we saved the worst for last, from Mark Pallavi. Mark Pallavi, he says, the worst I can think of is Machine Head Catharsis. 100% agree. The worst metal album of all time, and it's not even close. Hell, the last Five Finger Death Punch album is better than Catharsis. Saint Anger, infinitely better than Catharsis. Aluminum Anus, infinitely better than Catharsis. Queensryche's Dedicated to Chaos, infinitely better than Catharsis. 6 Feet Under, Nightmares of the Decomposed, which is probably the second worst metal album of all time, but still infinitely better than Catharsis. This entire album, and I've not listened to the whole thing all the way through, I couldn't do it because it's so fucking terrible, but I don't even need to listen to the whole thing to know how bad it is. Basically, it was Rob Flynn becoming the heavy metal representative of SJW, and it completely backfired, and decided to write faux rap metal songs, like as if he's back in the new metal era for what the fuck reason. And why does it have to be over 75 minutes long when all the songs are horrid? Ugh, just... fuck this album. Fuck this album straight to hell. If only this album didn't exist, the world would be a better place. I will go ahead and say it. And this album is one of the principal reasons why I'm not the world's biggest fan of Rob Flynn or Machine Head, despite there's a few good albums by Machine Head that I do plan on getting one day. But as a whole, it's this album that ruined Machine Head and Rob Flynn forever for me. I know some people might think that's stupid, but that's just how I feel. It was just an experiment gone horribly wrong, and I hope to God we never get something like this ever again. So, any of the other albums you want to say is bad, nothing's going to be worse than Catharsis, even if it tried. I dare a band out there try and write an album worse than this. Even Five Finger Death Punch, everything they've done is better than Catharsis. And that's all I've got to say about that. So anyways, that does it for this little diatribe of going through bad metal albums. Sorry I didn't have the graphics up. I was kind of in a time crunch when making this video, because I'm trying to get through a few videos before the end of the year, so there you have it with that. But anyways, thank you guys who submitted your suggestions. I'm glad I finally got into doing this one. Yeah, this one wasn't as long as the band versus band one, and that was because, well, again, camera battery life being stupid. But yeah, a lot of these were kind of repeats, so there you go with all that. But anyways, what do you guys think is the worst metal album of all time? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.